Hello, everyone. I'm Lasagna Thompson, and I'm the founder of the InterFaith Film and Music Festival. We are entering our sixth season, and we're so excited to be able to have a lineup of illustrious filmmakers and producers joining us this year from all different walks and from across the globe. And today we're going to be discussing the ups, the downs, and the hoorays for the project together for the Peru Church. And the Peru Church is located in Vermont, but it has lots of special qualities and dynamic people and a history that motivated the filmmakers to tell us about it. And so we'll use this opportunity to be able to dive deeper as to how the teams were put together, how funding was initiated, and then also in terms of just making this project a success. Okay, our two guests that we have with us on the film team include Bill and Mason. And let's go ahead and start off with you, Bill, giving us a little bit about your background, and then we'll move over to Mason.
Well, sure. I've been a filmmaker for probably 55 or 60 years. I started in high school, growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I continued it through college. And I was making films in college. I used to be a ski film cameraman for Warren Miller, who was a legend in the industry, and that led to being able to do commercials and documentaries and some independent films, some marketing films. There aren't any type of films I haven't done at one time or another. And the Peru Church video, which I did in concert with my high school buddy from northeastern Pennsylvania, Mason Daring as well, is just another example. I had not done anything quite like that before, so every new film's an adventure.
Nice, nice. And Mason, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how did you come about?
I actually I crossed with Bill a few times. We were in a rock and roll band in eighth grade, and then I worked for him when I was in law school, and to supplement my non-existent income, I worked with Bill as an editor, and then ended up directing and writing commercials for him. So I learned about filmmaking largely from Bill when I was a young lawyer, but then life took a different turn, and I started writing music for feature films in Hollywood, and kind of backed into that through Bill. And the first movie we did together was called Return of the Secaucus 7, of John Sayles' film that was pretty well known. And then ended up just writing music I did about 75 or 80 movies in Hollywood, for everybody from independents to Disney and Fox and Miramax, and played music live just because it's fun and I enjoy it. And I ended up I have a house in Vermont and teach skiing up there. And I became drawn into this particular church through their minister, who was a friend of mine. And I realized what an unusual church it was. It's hard to describe. You have to see the movie to understand the spirit of this church. I decided that I was a trustee of the church, and I thought, well, let's make a movie about this. And I called Bill, and he was kind enough to hop on board, so we did it together from there.
That is amazing. And what I wanted to do was just share with everyone that we have our Karmisha Superville, who's also part of the InterFaith Film and Music Festival, and she's coming on board. She's sharing of her busy and hectic schedule to just touch base with us. And Karmisha, we have already talked about how we were getting connected with the Peru Church, understanding about Mason and Bill's background. And so if you can maybe dive in just a little bit deeper in terms of some of the questions that you had about the film.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much, Lasagna, for having me. I'm so happy that you're doing this and this platform with the InterFaith Film Festival. It's amazing and it's so needed. So thank you again for having me. Again, my name is Karmisha Superville, podcaster for the Chopper Podcast. Bill, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. I'm so excited to speak to you. Love what you're working on and what you have built. And I would love to start. First, let's talk about legacy. What does that mean to you in terms of legacy?
Well, legacy relative to filmmaking, to this particular film, to the Peru Church.
Yes, all of that. But let's start with, what does Bill legacy entail? Like, when you look back on your work, where does, in the bulk of work that you've done, what does legacy mean to you in terms of that, and in terms of the footprint that you've left?
Well, having been a person who's been making films since I was in high school, it's the legacy is one of sort of joy. I've enjoyed every aspect of the thing I love about filmmaking is that it can be so diverse. The subject matter can range from a corporate product to a sport to, in this case, a church. And when you're working with someone on a film, you may be dealing with someone or people you have no background with. And part of the challenge is to learn about them and to find out what the essence of their story is. So every film project that you undertake, whether it's something that you're doing in connection with Hollywood, or whether it's a very low budget for a local person or a local company or a local organization, you got to find out what their story is and how best to tell it. And that's storytelling really is the greatest part of the filmmaking experience. As far as I'm concerned, I've always been a pretty good storyteller. I can tell a good joke, and I like to think I can tell a pretty good story on film too.
Amazing, amazing. And you know what? It's amazing that you spoke about storytelling, because in our society today, we have a lot of folks that are telling stories. And so I want to ask you, what is 3 key attributes to storytelling in terms of authenticity? What are 3 key attributes in terms of storytelling?
Well, in terms of filmmaking, I love, especially in any kind of documentary, which sort of like the Peru Church film, it's a little documentary. But you can do it with a couple of different ways. Sometimes you're using a narrator and you've written things out carefully in advance as to what the story is. But I always find it most interesting to hear the story told in the words of the people who are most directly involved. So in general, even when people hire me to do commercial projects, they hire me because I'm a real person director. Yes. I get along, I can interview people well. I can bring out who they are on camera. And there's nothing more honest or truthful than that. And if you do it right, they kind of tell their own story. And that's really pretty well represented in the Peru Church video. Now, that's one thing. Obviously, that title to incorporate that. And then when you're telling a very serious story that's got a serious turn, the fact that there was some element of humor earlier makes it all the more dramatic. So a touch of humor always plays a role in that. And finally, I always tell young people who want to get into filmmaking that really one of the most important elements is writing, being a good writer. If you can write a basic outline of a film, if you can write a story, if you can write dialogue, chances are you're going to be able to tell a pretty good story. So those who think you should only focus on the film and the camera, no, I don't think so. Or on the lighting, or that's all important. There are people who help you do that. But writing from the standpoint of getting support for the film or getting other people interested in it, or ultimately even telling the final story, there's nothing more important than writing.
I love that. So what I heard is authenticity and maintaining that authenticity. What I heard is leading with humor and how you integrate that into the storytelling. It's still a key to storytelling. Truly love that. Love that. So what are some things that, what are some ingredients to the Peru Church that you have created? What are some things that folks should look forward to in this documentary, if you can share?
Well, let's let Mason weigh in on that. He was really the one who got me involved because he knew the whole church's story, and he had some ideas on how he would like that story told, and I'll let him weigh in on that.
Okay, Mason.
The Peru Church, the Peru Church is I found I've been to a lot of churches. My parents were very involved in Presbyterian churches when I grew up, in Congregational churches when we moved to towns that they're roughly the same theology. But my sister became a missionary in Mexico. She's Pentecostal actually, and so I've always been involved to churches. But when I went to the Peru Church, I thought I'd never seen. It's almost like a Quaker meeting. People get up and talk to each other in church all the time. You have a big part of the services called Thoughts and Concerns, and what's on your mind, basically, or who should we pray for? Tell us about people you think we want to pray for. And that's a great part. Music is a massive part of the Peru Church. We do concerts every actual, we have sermons. They're relatively short, but we have a great deal of music every Sunday morning. I mean, 3 or 4 or 5 pieces of music, and a lot of musicians, some of them professional. Most of them, actually, now that I think about it, are professional, like myself. So the talent level is pretty high. And it doesn't matter if it's high or not. Nobody cares how good people are. They just sort of coincidentally happen to be pretty good. And I'll tell you what it's got mostly, and what I really wanted to say in this: joy. It's the most joyous church I've ever been to. In 2023, joy's getting to be a little short supply sometimes.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you read the papers. And it's a very joyous church. I wanted that to be evident to people. It's become very popular. Unfortunately, so many churches are having a hard time staying open, getting talented leaders. It requires a lot of volunteer people from community to spend time. It's working in Peru, Vermont. Largely because I think of our minister is very charismatic. Melissa O'Brien's an extraordinary woman. And she's getting to be very well known.
Well, also, let me weigh in here, because right out of the blocks, Mason had an idea, because sometimes when you're asking people, when you want to have the people themselves, the congregation, the members of the church who show up, and a variety of faiths, by the way, that's part of the interesting part of the church, is there are people of the Jewish faith who come to this Congregational Church. And
we have a lot of Jewish people and a lot of Catholics.
Yes, absolutely.
Fine by me. Works for me. Yeah.
But if we're not going to do a narrator, and if we're going to basically be putting people on the spot and talking to them, some people are more comfortable talking on camera than others.
Yes.
But his idea right out of the blocks was, well, just for fun, just so we make sure we have something, let's get each person who's willing to talk to us, let's ask them for one word to describe the church. What comes to mind when you think of this organization that is so important to you, that you go to every week? Just give us one word. And that was a good conversation starter in the course of getting people to really think. And we worked those one words into the film. In fact, before we cut the longer version of the film, we did like a 1-minute version that's just nothing but one words from people. And that turned out to be a little teaser. We actually uploaded that to your website. It's a little trailer as well. But it was on the basis of the one words and the diversity of responses to that sort of set up the outline for the longer version of the film. And we worked in little bursts of those one words, 5 or 6 of them at a time. It turned out to be a very useful editing tool and a great way to start a structure for the story. And that was his idea. That was something Mason wanted to do right out of the box.
Mason, why did you believe that you wanted to incorporate that one word? And I'm curious, what was the consensus of that one word? What was the consensus of the recurring theme of that one word?
Community.
Community.
That seemed to be the most popular answer. Love.
Well, joy came into it. Joy, love, and community are the words I remember.
I don't know. I just had the idea. You know, sometimes you have ideas, you know, and generally mine are bad. But that one worked out, and everybody got interested in seeing a 3-minute, which is a 3-minute movie of people going joy, community, love, you know, and
spirituality, you know, things
duality,
of that.
right, and harmony, and actually, I was the one that said harmony. Nobody else said it, but it just was a way to break the ice and have people get into making a movie, because we wanted a lot of people talking in this. You know, of course, we wanted Melissa O'Brien, who's wonderful in it, and it was an icebreaker. And as Bill said, it makes a great trailer for the movie too. If you want to see the preview, watch 3 minutes of that, and hopefully you'll want to see the bigger film.
I love that. And that is beautiful. And the overarching theme is community, because out of community comes joy. Out of community comes harmony, love. And I think, as you said earlier, that needs to be, I think Bill said it, that needs to be echoed more in our community as a whole, in our society. So that is amazing. Let's jump into, Mason, if you can describe your creative process. What does that entail? Your creative process, if you can describe it.
In this movie, you know, sometimes with documentaries, you don't know what you're going to get. You could have a script, but you're going to get off it pretty quick. So this was just shoot. I said, Bill, come on, we got to shoot. We got to shoot these people. We've got to shoot it's a beautiful building. It's a 175-year-old building. The church actually existed before that. I mean, it's old New England at its best. So, I wanted to show the church from the outside, and then of course from the inside, and then fill it with people. So that's how we sort of did it little by little. That way we showed some community activities, a huge outdoor party at Christmas that we had, a bonfire, and something in the summer where we sort of were celebrating the summer in Vermont with church goers. So we shot footage, and we shot footage, and we shot footage, and then poor Bill had the task of actually making sense out of it, because that's the hard thing with documentaries. You end up your shooting ratio is, instead of being 1 to 10, is 1 to what, 30, 40, I don't know. It's a lot. And Bill had to make sense of it. He had to wade through it. Bill's a superb editor, so it made sense.
Also, this was I mean, I've worked on projects that were $300,000 and $400,000 in budget, you know, related to some Hollywood things. The Peru Church video was not one of those.
Right.
It was an idea that Mason had, and there was no budget for it. It's not something that a church budgets money for something like this. Yeah, this was the 175th anniversary. He knew the people at the church, and he knew how important it was in the community, and thought, well, it was almost like the old Mickey Rooney thing. Well, let's get together and put on a show. But if you look at the film, you can tell that some of it was shot on iPhones. Some of it was shot with a real camera. It was like you did what you could when you could do it, and for essentially no money. I mean, this is what you know, two of us sort of got together to do as a worthy project because we were interested in it. We were motivated to do it, but it wasn't like there was any budget for it. It was the total opposite of some of the contracted jobs that we do. But when you know the basic skills of filmmaking, they can kind of come in handy sometimes, even if you're just doing something with your family.
I love that. And that is such a beautiful, it's a teachable moment as well, because you just said something that's key. So many of us in a society today, we are driven by money. We are driven by this whole work culture and having to be paid or compensated for our work, for our artistry. But you have also taught us, you and Mason have taught us that no, sometimes you have to go back to the passion, go back to the motivation, draw inspiration from that, and that determines the dedication. So I love that. And that brings me to ask, what made you become first interested and introduced to the movie making business? What was that? What was that catalyst, if we can think back?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I was in high school. My interest was in drama. I was, I usually went out for the play and tried to get one of the leads. I liked drama. I liked theater. Uh, but back then, and we're talking mid to late 60s now. I mean, no, I had hair and everything back
Right.
then. And filmmaking back then wasn't something people were doing. Now there are film schools everywhere. Every college boasts of a film school. Even when I went to Dartmouth, a major college, they didn't really have any kind of film instructional program. I ended up being the first person to graduate with a special major in film theory and production, and that they let me pretty much design the syllabus for it. Now they, like NYU and many other wonderful colleges, have whole media departments and so forth. But what I discovered early on was that I was interested in films. I love to go to movies. I kind of wanted to take my interest in theater and tell some stories, but there was nobody else doing the camera work. There wasn't anybody else who knew how to do it. So I was learning on the fly. I ended up thinking I was going to be more in front of the camera, and ended up sort of being around in back of the camera, being the guy who was helping other people act, or other people, real people, come across authentically on camera. So to that extent, it was a little bit of an accident. And I still do some on-camera stuff from time to time. I was a newscaster for a while, and by newscasting at a local TV station up in New Hampshire, I was able to raise money to make my own little films. So I was in front of the camera earning money to be behind the camera telling stories. And that's kind of the way I got into it, and I've never left.
Beautiful, beautiful. Mason, would you love to provide your experience as to what was the catalyst that allowed you to be a part of this industry?
Yeah, I mean, mine was funny, actually. I got into theatrical features the weirdest way you can imagine, by being a lawyer. I was a lawyer for a guy named John Sayles, who went on to do 17 pretty well-known movies. I did his law work when the movie Bill produced, called Return of the Secaucus 7. And then he called me up in a second movie, Leanna, and he said, "Can you do the lawyer and can you do the music?" And I said, "I don't want to be a lawyer anymore." I said, "I quit." And I said, "I'll get you a lawyer. I just want to write the music." So that's what I did. And then Hollywood called, and I started doing movies for Fox and Disney. And then I did a bunch of movies for John. I did Brother from Another Planet, which is one of the greatest comedies ever done. And I did Lone Star, and then I worked with Meryl Streep on a movie called Music of the Heart, and with Wes Craven directing that. And I got to work with pretty famous directors and pretty famous writers. And I was lucky. You turn around, look backward down the path, and think, how did I get here? How did I get this far when I didn't know what I was going to do for a living? I happened on the way, as I mentioned earlier, Bill taught me how to edit, and then I directed and produced for him. So when it was time to do the Peru Church film, I knew we could work together on it, and we ended up doing another film for a similar organization in Vermont that teaches skiing to people with disabilities, called Adaptive Skiing, and we did a movie for them. And now we're thinking of doing a documentary on some of my musical partners. And so, how did you? I get asked you, Karmisha, how did here we are talking about this festival that you organized, how'd you get there? And you think, gee, I didn't get up when I was 16 or 20 years old and say, I'm going to do that. You just kind of wandered around through the universe and turn around, look behind you, and say, well, I guess that's how I got here. I mean, you're both very attractive, smart young women. Gee whiz, make me wish I were young.
You are young at heart.
Well,
Thank
he
you.
referenced the story that we're doing right now. I mean, the reason we weren't even sure we could participate here is because you've got us on a shoot day. You've got us on a performance day here.
Yeah.
We were very happy that you liked the Peru film and are featuring it in your festival and so forth. But he's busy preparing with his long-term singing partner, Jeannie Stahl. They're very popular throughout New England and in Boston. He's doing a sold-out concert tonight, which is actually, ironically, taking place in a church sanctuary in Marblehead, Massachusetts. And the place is going to be sold out. We had already started a little documentary project where I've been filming them recording in studio and in several other concerts, like at the famous Passim Coffee House Club in Boston that gave their start. People like Bonnie Raitt and Bob Dylan have performed there. I filmed them there last month. I'm going to shoot tonight's concert that's taking place in the church sanctuary. So yeah, while I'm doing this, I'm busy charging batteries here so that, we've got plenty of battery power. And after this, I'm going to be hustling up north to Marblehead to start setting up for that. So we're kind of both pretty old, but I'm not sure that neither one of us, we always have some sort of little project that we're working on. In his case, it may be music. It may be being on the board of directors of places like the Adaptive Sports Center or the Peru Church. And for me, I'm sometimes doing stuff for producers in Hollywood where I'm doing location filming for major shows. Other times, it's a project like this, a joint project where we're doing something oriented on music. And since I was the drummer in his original high school rock band, I've had a long-term interest in music. I'm just not any good at it. So what I am good at is telling stories with film. So that's how I stay involved in that.
Amazing.
But by the way, I don't know if you know about this, but as you'd be interested, someday you might want to travel to Savannah. I spend the winters in Savannah now. I used to teach at Berklee College of Music for 15 years. Now I'm lecturing at SCAD. I don't know if you know what that is. It's called the Savannah College of Art and Design. And it is a huge movie making place. I mean, they have more gear than any college I've ever seen, including University of Southern California, which has got a pretty formidable movie making machine. But SCAD, they have a back lot. I've never seen a college with a back lot in my life. They shoot movies there all the time. And they even have a 300-person campus in Atlanta that's part of Tyler Perry's whole thing. The kids work on Tyler Perry's stuff. That's really an amazing college. And this is why movies are becoming so popular. Everybody's making them because you can learn how to make movies in college. And by the time you get out of college, go right ahead.
Not only that, people are actually making movies on smartphones these days. We use the smartphone a lot on the Peru Church video. I've used it I do major TV ads sometimes. There's a political consultant out of Washington who uses me frequently to promote different causes that he's involved in, as well as candidates. He's a Democratic political consultant. And even though we'll be using, big cameras on the main part of the shoot, in studio or with a full crew and so forth, I sometimes still, while they're setting up, I'm shooting all sorts of B-roll and texture with my iPhone, because if you know what you're doing, these things are incredibly useful. So the technology that is available now to all manner of people has brought such a revolution in the whole art of filmmaking. It's not to be believed. In the old days, you had to be able to afford to have a film camera or rent it and buy the film and process the film. And it was so expensive and there was so much heavy equipment. These days, honest to God, if you know what you're doing, an iPhone can be pretty darn useful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much. This has been such an enlightening conversation. As we wrap up, I'm curious, as we have listeners and younger listeners and those creatives, what would you say, because you all have longevity, what would you say, what advice can you provide for maintaining longevity in such a tumultuous, at times, tumultuous industry? How can one maintain longevity? And lastly, what are some projects that we can look forward to in the upcoming year? You can take that, Bill.
Well, I always tell folks, because I've mentored a goodly number of people who started out working for me as production assistants who were maybe getting $100 a day or $150 a day. Some of them are now producing out in Los Angeles and in New York. And I always tell people, no matter what the job you're hired for, do it. If you're getting coffee, do a good job getting coffee. Do it really well. Keep it hot. Ask people what they want in the coffee and then deliver. Demonstrate that no matter what task or challenge you're handed, you can hit it out of the park, because people notice that. Part of my job, I'm based in Boston, but one of the reasons I get a fair amount of work from Hollywood producers is that no matter what they're asking me to do in terms of getting, shooting local scenes that they can edit into their projects and so forth, I'm going to do it absolutely to the best that I can do it. I'm going to make them look as good as possible. And next time, guess who they're going to call when they need something? So for years, I shot a lot of stuff for the David E. Kelly productions in Boston, Ally McBeal, Boston Legal, The Practice. I would do all the Boston scenes for them. But when the guy who was doing that, producing it, his next show was a show on ABC called The Good Doctor, which takes place in San Jose, but they were shooting it in Vancouver because it was cheaper up there. But he wanted scenes from San Jose. So he called me up at one point and said, "Hey, Bill, what do you know about San Jose? I know you're in Boston, but what do you know about San Jose?" And hey, I know Dionne Warwick as well as anybody's music. I said, "I know the way. I know the way. I can get on an airplane and get out there and hire a crew out of San Francisco and film for them." So he knew I'd make them look good and would give them something that could edit well into the show. And that's one of the reasons I've been in it for a long time. I always just make sure I'm doing the best I can. I try to deliver. I try to over deliver, if you will. And I recommend that to anybody. The people who do that when they're working for me, I notice that. I hire them again.
Love it. Love it. Mason, maintain a longevity.
I know we're running out of time here, so I'll tell you what I tell people: be on time. If you got a 9 o'clock meeting, be there at 8:59. Do not be there at 9:01. And that's the first thing. And when you think about that, that just means you're a professional. You're not an amateur anymore. And if you're a professional, doesn't matter how much you're getting paid. Once you get $1 or more, it's a whole different world. And learn what a professional really means. Be that way with people. And I also tell my students, I used to say, don't forget about happiness. If you think happiness is being successful, you're wrong. There are a lot of successful people who are miserable. And don't lose sight of happiness or your friends or your history, and certainly not your family. Just remember to think about that while you're trying to be successful. That's it.
I love that. Amazing. Mason, I know you spoke about some projects. Bill, would you like to provide any projects that you're working on to tell the listeners? Any projects for the new year?
Well, I know it's going to be a big election year. And for example, this past March, there was a huge mayor's election race in the city of Chicago. It ended up being between two Democrats who wanted to be the new mayor of Chicago. And I ended up spending most of March in Chicago working for this election consultant, the Democratic consultant, for one of those two candidates. And probably in the course of March, I think I shot 23 commercials in 1 month. And I do know that there are going to be some critical Senate and congressional elections coming up this year. And they've already talked to me about working on some projects in Florida and in Maine. Now, they're not even telling me who the candidates are at this point, but I do know that that's something that's probably going to be in my future. And I always have folks coming to me with interesting pro bono projects, which is what pretty much what the Peru Church video was, what the BART adaptive sports program was. And I don't want to start naming them at this point until they become a reality. But I'm always talking to folks about, okay, we could shoot that. Yeah, we could shoot that in July, probably something. That would be a good thing to do. So I've got a few things on the agenda. And the one thing I mean, we're both in our mid-70s, okay? We're pretty old for this business. We've outlasted, between the two of us, a lot of our competition. Most of my college, classmates, they're long since retired. They went into, law and medicine and investment and real estate and all sorts of stuff. And most of them are retired and happily retired. They're glad they don't have that responsibility anymore. I'm never going to retire. I'm working in the fun toy business. All right. I love filmmaking. And I can't imagine retiring because the next project is going to be the most interesting one yet. So that's the other reason I tell folks, if you want to get into filmmaking, be prepared for long days. Sometimes they're 16, 18, 20-hour days. So keep yourself reasonably in shape for that. But you also have to love it. And if you don't love it, get out of it, because it's not easy and it demands a lot of your time and a lot of creativity. And there's a major personal investment there. I love it. So, I'll be doing it 10, 15 years from now.
I love it. My goodness, such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Certainly, as well as availing yourself, you guys are literally actively working and took time from your busy schedule to speak with us and to our listeners. So we really want to thank you and wish you happy holidays. Again, my name is Karmisha Superville, podcaster for the Chapter Podcast. I will turn the program now back on to Lasagna.
And just wanted to say
Bye,
thank you.
Kamisha. Bye, Lasagna.
It's okay.
Bye-bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And now, I got